Welcome to Voices After Silence, the podcast from Agora Talks. This is episode 12.
It is really great to be here for another one.
Yeah, and just to frame where we are today, in our previous episode, episode 11, we heard the testimony of Anne-Marie Allen, who shared her experiences as a former Opus Dei assistant numerary in Ireland.
All right, which was an incredibly powerful account.
It really was.
No.
And today, we're transitioning to another personal testimony from a former assistant numerary. But this time, the context is Spain. We're going to be looking at the account of Verónica Navarro.
I swore I'd leave this town. Funny how it never left me. Life looks different in a back row rear view. Things I thought I wanted, some I did, some I outgrew. Count my blessings on the center line.
Yeah, she spent 20 years inside the institution before finally leaving in 2006. But before we really get into Veronica's timeline, it's critical that we set our analytical framework here.
Absolutely.
Because the goal today is not to suggest that Anne-Marie and Veronica had identical experiences.
Right.
They are two different women living in different countries, experiencing completely different local cultures at different times.
Exactly. We're not just mapping one story onto the other.
No, not at all. Instead, we want to invite you, the listener, to actively listen, compare, and notice the similarities and the differences for yourself. Because when we place independent testimonies from different places and periods side by side, they raise some really critical questions.
Like whether these are just isolated incidents.
Precisely. We have to ask ourselves, are these isolated individual experiences, or do they reflect broader systemic institutional patterns?
Right. And I want you to keep that question running in the background as we talk today. But real quick, before we jump into Veronica's story, I have a really brief request for everyone listening.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
If you value this kind of documentary work, if you find hearing and analyzing these testimonies important, please take a second to subscribe to Agora Talks. Like the video, drop a comment, and share it.
It really does make a huge difference.
It does. Because Agora Talks is maintaining this dedicated English language channel, specifically so that these source materials can reach an international audience. You know, historically, a lot of this stuff is circulated almost entirely in Spanish.
Which is a massive barrier.
Yeah, exactly. So it's about breaking down that language barrier so these voices can actually be heard globally. So please, subscribe if you haven't already.
It is vital work because, as we'll see today, isolation often relies on a lack of shared information. And sharing information is exactly what Veronica is doing now.
Absolutely.
But I want to be clear, we aren't going to just give you a chronological summary of her 20 years. That's not the point. We are using Veronica's own retrospective understanding as our lens today.
Right, her looking back and interpreting it all.
Yeah. The core of our discussion is that profound difference between physically leaving a high-control environment and psychologically escaping it. Veronica describes in really great detail how a person can walk out the front door, yet continue interpreting their entire past and present through the institution's categories for years afterward.
Which is just terrifying when you think about it. The
Yeah.
physical escape is almost the easy part.
Oh, without a doubt.
So we really have to understand how those psychological walls get built in the first place. Let's look at the context of her recruitment. Because as you pointed out before, this doesn't happen in a vacuum.
No, context is everything.
So we are in the 1980s in Torrejón de Ardoz, which is a municipality in Spain. Veronica comes from a large family, 5 siblings. Her dad works, her mom is a homemaker, and, you know, resources are definitely tight.
It's a working class environment, very crowded.
Yeah, and something that really stuck out to me in her testimony was her description of the local environment at the time. She talks about the schools being fraught with drugs and danger.
You really have to understand the macro social anxiety of Spain in the 1980s to get this vulnerability. The country had recently transitioned out of decades of a rigid dictatorship under Franco.
Right, into this sudden, rapid period of social freedom.
Exactly. And with that rapid transition came a devastating heroin epidemic that just ravaged working class and middle class neighborhoods. Parents were genuinely existentially terrified for their children.
It was literally on the streets right outside their doors.
Yes. So into this atmosphere of parental terror, Veronica is hospitalized frequently as a little girl for various illnesses.
Right, she had a lot of health issues early on.
She did. And during one of these hospital stays, her mother meets a nurse in the hospital chapel. Now, this nurse happens to be an agregada.
Which is a married member of Opus Dei, right?
Correct. So this nurse gives Veronica's mom a prayer card of the founder, José María Escrivá. Veronica recovers, and her mother stays in contact with this aggregata.
Which seems totally normal, just staying in touch with a nice nurse.
Exactly. And she starts attending formation activities. And what she sees there are happy, impeccably well-behaved young girls. To Veronica's mother, this institution suddenly represents an absolute oasis.
Like a literal sanctuary from the drugs and the chaos outside.
Yes, it is safety, morality, a good future, and a shield. It is the ultimate promise of protection. If we look at the mother's psychology here, it makes perfect sense. She's looking for a safe harbor for her kids.
But wait, let me stop you there, because I know what everyone listening is thinking right now. Sending your kid to a nice, orderly Catholic youth group is one thing. That totally tracks.
Sure.
But Veronica was recruited into a highly demanding, life-altering commitment at age 13. How does a parent hand over a 12 or 13-year-old child to an institution with such rigorous demands? I mean, seeing well-behaved girls doesn't automatically translate to giving up your daughter. I just don't get the parent's psychology in making that massive leap.
It is a massive leap, you're right. But the key to understanding it is that it rarely happens all at once. It happens through a gradient of trust. Veronica explicitly identifies this as recruitment exploiting vulnerability.
Okay, how so?
Well, the first contact Veronica had wasn't a demand for lifelong commitment. It was at age 12, going to Torres Ciudad, which is this beautiful shrine built by Opus Dei.
So just a weekend trip, basically.
Exactly. And Veronica comes from a devout Christian family, so accepting confession, mass, and religious activities doesn't feel foreign or threatening to them. It feels completely natural.
Right, aligns with what they already do.
Yeah, the institution essentially cloaks its extreme demands in the familiar, comforting garments of traditional devotion.
Though it's wild, she actually notes that at that initial event at the shrine, she saw a girl crying and asking why the institution had stolen her sister, who was already an assistant numerary.
Yes.
Looking back, I mean, that is a glaring neon red flag.
It is, absolutely. But the overarching narrative of safety and prestige overrides those warning signs for the parents. The critical moment, though, happens when Veronica is just 13, not even 14 yet.
Right, the trip to Rome.
Yes, she travels to Rome, and this is where they formally propose the vocation to her.
At 13 years old, I mean, she says she didn't resist at all. The numerary proposing it to her was actually shocked by how enthusiastically she agreed. Veronica just kept saying yes, yes, yes.
You have to think about the psychological package being offered to a 13-year-old girl from a crowded, resource-strapped home. They aren't just offering a spiritual path here.
Right. What else are they offering?
They presented a future where she would have her own room. She would travel. She would have an older, sophisticated person dedicated entirely to listening to her and guiding her. For a teenager craving identity, that is intoxicating.
Oh, wow. Yeah, it's upward mobility.
It is. It's individuality, and it is a profound declaration of specialness.
You are the chosen one.
Exactly.
And bringing this back to Anne Ray Allen's testimony just for a second, we see this recurring theme, the way institutions leverage the genuine trust of families and, honestly, the massive ethical void of recruiting minors.
It is highly problematic.
A 13-year-old cannot legally sign a contract for a cell phone. She doesn't have the cognitive development to understand long-term consequences. Yet she is making a lifelong spiritual and structural commitment that will dictate her entire existence.
Which is why Veronica now firmly states that the recruitment of minors is manipulation, and she believes it simply should not be allowed.
I can absolutely see why she says that.
But to understand how that enthusiastic, naive yes from a 13-year-old transforms into decades of absolute, unquestioning compliance, we have to look at the immediate environmental shift she experienced right after she made that commitment.
Okay, so the craft springs shut. She moves to a center in Madrid called Los Tilos.
Yes.
And the stated reason for this move, like what her parents are told, is that she is going to study family and socioeconomic economics.
Which sounds incredibly academic.
Right. It sounds like a real professional degree. But Veronica notes that this title was essentially a cover. What she was actually doing was learning how to clean bathrooms, cook, and maintain the oratory.
This is the foundation of the architecture of isolation. The physical environment changes, the physical labor begins. But perhaps the most insidious tool of isolation introduced at this stage is sociolinguistic.
Oh, sociolinguistic.
Yes, it is the weaponization of language.
Oh, the internal vocabulary. Yes, this absolutely fascinated me in her account. Veronica shares this anecdote about a Numerary assistant who proudly went up to Pilar Urbano, who is a very well-known Spanish journalist and author, to get a book signed.
Right, a very prominent figure.
Yeah. And the assistant tells the author, Pilar, I worked in your administration. And the journalist is just visibly shocked and embarrassed.
Because, in the outside world, if you tell a prominent author you work in their administration, it implies you manage their business affairs. Or maybe you're a high-level executive assistant.
Right, it's a white-collar job.
Exactly. But in the bespoke internal vocabulary of Opus Dei, administration means domestic service. It means you were the person cooking, scrubbing floors, and doing the laundry for the center where the author stayed.
And the poor Numerary assistant went home in tears because no one had ever explained to her that her internal vocabulary meant something completely different to the rest of society.
It's incredible. She literally couldn't communicate her own reality to the outside world.
There is another anecdote she shares that is almost darkly comic, if it wasn't so sad. A member went to a Social Security office to sort out some paperwork.
Oh, the extension story.
Yeah. She tells the clerk she works in an administration. The clerk, trying to be helpful, assumes she works for a government administration or a large corporate house and asks, okay, what's your extension?
Meaning her phone extension.
Right. And the member responds by giving her a postal code.
It sounds absurd, but the underlying mechanics are highly effective. High control groups use bespoke language for two distinct purposes. First, it creates intense in-group cohesion.
Because you have your own secret language.
Yes. When you share a secret language, you feel special, you feel connected to the group, and outsiders feel alien. But the secondary, far more damaging purpose is that it acts as an invisible linguistic prison wall.
Like corporate jargon, but dialed up to the point of total reality distortion.
Exactly. It renders members incapable of navigating the outside world. You are told you are a Christian in the middle of the world, yet you don't possess the basic linguistic tools to hold a mundane conversation at a Social Security office.
Wow.
If you can't describe your life to an outsider, you can never ask an outsider for help. You are subtly but completely trapped.
It's like you're physically walking the streets of Madrid, but psychologically you are living on a different planet.
That is exactly what it is.
And that linguistic isolation is reinforced by total, absolute surveillance. Because Veronica realizes that her entire life is being monitored. Not just her actions, but her internal thoughts. Everything she says in spiritual direction, everything she confesses, is discussed between the director and the priest.
The destruction of privacy must be absolute for the conditioning to hold. She describes how the founder stated that the fraternal chat, which is a structured, mandatory conversation with a superior, and the sacrament of confession were essentially the same thing.
Wait, I really want to make sure I understand the gravity of that.
Yeah.
In Catholicism, the seal of confession is absolute.
Yes. It is sacred.
You cannot share what is said. By equating a chat with a superior to confession, are they essentially demanding that same level of deep, compromising personal disclosure, but without the seal of privacy?
That is exactly the function. They are extracting the deepest vulnerabilities, doubts, and sins of the individual under the guise of spiritual guidance. And then they share that information among the leadership to manage and control the member.
So there is literally no sanctuary, no internal thought that belongs only to you.
None.
And the physical manifestation of this surveillance is almost cruel in its irony. Veronica herself was the one assigned to carry the envelopes to the delegation twice a week.
Yes, the mail run.
She physically transported the papers that contained all these private reports about herself and her peers. Imagine being the mail carrier for your own surveillance state, delivering the very files that will be used to control your behavior, all while believing it's for your own spiritual good.
It is the ultimate expression of control when the subject actively participates in their own subjugation without even realizing it.
When Veronica eventually noticed that the advice she received in spiritual direction perfectly mirrored the advice she got from the priest in confession, she said the illusion broke slightly.
Because she realized they were talking about her behind her back.
Exactly. She realized, oh, they already know everything about me. She calls it textbook abuse. And I mean, she is right.
She is. And all of this, the linguistic isolation, the surveillance, it wasn't happening in a vacuum. It was physically reinforced by a grueling, relentless labor structure.
Which brings us to the reality of her daily life as a young teenager. At just 14 years old, Veronica is sent to work at the Segregation Center, a residence for elderly numeraries.
14. She is just a child.
The literal child.
And the age is critical because her physical and cognitive development is still entirely malleable.
Her schedule was just staggering. She would wake up at dawn, attend a brief class, eat, pray, run to catch a bus to get to the center. She had maybe half an hour to study, half an hour for professional training, and then she had to change into a black uniform with lace cuffs and an apron.
Right. Pull her hair back and go to work.
Yeah, answering phones, opening doors, cleaning.
And for this labor, she ostensibly earned a salary, 40,000 pesetas, but she never actually saw or controlled that money. It was handed directly to the director.
Hold on, I really need to push back on this. Because moving money around on a ledger without consent, I mean, that's just blatant wage theft, isn't it?
Well, from an outside perspective, absolutely.
She mentions a specific instance where the secretary called her and said, Veronica, this month your twin sister Fatma earned less babysitting than you, so your combined pay will cover both your residencies.
Right.
She had no say in this. She couldn't consent to it. How on earth is this justified internally?
Internally, it is justified under the vow or virtue of poverty and the idea that the institution is your family, so all resources are pooled for the common good. But structurally, what you are looking at is textbook economic dependence.
Because they're preventing her from ever touching a bank account.
Exactly. By preventing a young woman from managing her own money, the institution ensures she never builds a safety net. She learns zero financial literacy. She has no resources of her own.
She couldn't afford a bus ticket out of there if she tried.
No. If you do not control the fruits of your labor, you have no practical means to leave. It binds you entirely to the institution for your basic survival.
It's a trap made of lace cuffs and ledgers. And the physical reality of the domestic work only gets more intense as she gets older.
Much more intense.
By the time she is 17, she is at the center of studies. The way Veronica describes the laundry duty, it is visceral. It is completely dehumanizing.
The sheer volume and the intimate nature of the work is staggering.
She describes having to empty these massive bags of the residents' dirty clothes. We're talking about used handkerchiefs, cloth ones, not paper, full of mucus, and soiled underwear.
Yes, very unsanitary.
They had to sort through all of this in a large sink, barehanded, no masks, no gloves, just a 17-year-old girl sorting through the bodily fluids of adults.
It's shocking by today's standards.
They had to check every single item for the residents' embroidered initials, wash it, dry it, fold it, and distribute it. And this would sometimes go on until 2 in the morning. And if a single sock was missing, they had to search every locker in the building to find it.
We really have to ask about the purpose of this specific kind of labor. Yes, obviously the clothes need to be washed, but the conditions, the bare hands, the late nights, the intense, disproportionate scrutiny over a single missing sock, they serve a dual purpose.
Which is what?
It accomplishes the domestic needs of the center, yes, but it also functions to break down the ego and the boundaries of the worker. You are performing the most intimate, menial tasks for others, entirely erasing your own comfort or hygiene.
Wow. And the contrast between the young women doing the work and the people receiving the service is jarring, especially when you look at the gender dynamic.
It's incredibly stark.
Veronica shares her first real contact with the opposite sex at age 17. She was assigned to serve meals in a dining room full of boys. She remembers trembling, literally shaking, holding a tray, hearing the cutlery rattling against the plates because she was so incredibly nervous.
She makes a point to note that they were never trained as actual professional waitresses. They were just expected to inherently perform this role silently and invisibly.
Exactly. And the girls weren't allowed to look the boys in the eye or interact with them normally.
Right, they had to be unseen.
But if they had to serve a special diet, the older assistant in charge would get angry and hiss at them. You have to look at their faces, not the backs of their heads.
To find the right person based on their initials.
Yeah. Often the girls were so terrified they physically couldn't do it, and the older assistant would have to snatch the tray and do it herself.
Looking back, Veronica expresses profound retrospective outrage at the misogyny and infantilization embedded in this entire dynamic.
Understandably so.
Think about the setup here. You have young men, often from affluent or large families where they never had to lift a finger, living in a center where their beds are miraculously made while they are out.
Their meals just appear in front of them?
Yes. Their meals are served to them on trays by trembling girls, and their dirty laundry disappears and returns washed and folded. They are being treated like high society aristocracy.
While the women are rendered into invisible, exhausted waitresses desperately searching for embroidered initials on collars.
Exactly.
Veronica asks a really brilliant question about this. She asks, What kind of human being can develop properly if they are never allowed to grow up and take care of their own basic needs?
The men are infantilized by being served hand and foot, and the women are dehumanized by being reduced to pure servitude.
Yeah. And just referencing Henry's testimony from Ireland again, we see this exact same structural reality, this rigid hierarchy between categories of members.
It's a defining feature.
You have numeraries who sleep on wooden boards as a form of mortification, but they are pursuing advanced degrees, working in the public sphere, and building professional careers. Then you have the assistant numeraries who might sleep on regular beds, but their entire existence is relegated to domestic servitude to support those numeraries.
It is essentially a caste system.
But this leads me to a major question. She is physically exhausted, working until 2 a.m. barehanded in the laundry. But physical exhaustion alone doesn't rewrite your personality.
No, it doesn't.
I mean, armies and medical residencies have exhausted people for centuries without turning them into cult members. What bridges the gap between just being incredibly tired and being fundamentally psychologically reprogrammed?
That is the crucial distinction. The bridge is what is known as the plan of life.
The plan of life.
Right. The labor alone makes you tired, but the labor combined with a hyper-dense spiritual schedule is designed to completely overwrite your internal cognitive processes.
Let me just list what Veronica was required to do every single day on top of the physical labor. It is wild.
Go for it.
Okay, the heroic minute where you jump out of bed the very second you wake up. Cold showers, Holy Mass, communion, a visit to the tabernacle, Thanksgiving, reading the gospel and spiritual books. The preces, which are specific prayers. The rosary, examinations of conscience. The angelus, ejaculatory prayers throughout the day, physical mortifications, study, maintaining order, enforcing a constant state of joy. Tuesday psalms, fraternal chats, circles, and the enmienda, which is the public accusation of your own faults in front of others.
To understand how this works, we need to think about human cognitive function. Think of your brain like a computer processor.
Okay.
You have a limited amount of RAM, random access memory, to process thoughts, reflect, and evaluate your surroundings.
Okay, I like this analogy.
If you are running a computer processor at 99% capacity on mandatory background maintenance tasks, so the prayers, the rules, the constant self-monitoring, the physical labor, what happens if you try to open a new program? Say, a program called critical thinking or self-reflection.
The system crashes. There's no RAM left to run it.
Precisely. Critical thinking requires space. It requires downtime. It requires the cognitive energy to step back and observe your environment objectively. The institution fills every single void in your day, starting from the literal second you open your eyes with that heroic minute.
By forcing you to jump out of bed immediately.
Yes, they override the body's natural transition from sleep to waking. They establish institutional control before conscious, independent thought can even begin. You literally do not have the bandwidth to question the institution.
Veronica explicitly notes that critical thinking was entirely annihilated. Thinking badly of the work or the church was considered a grave sin. And this total exhaustion makes you incredibly vulnerable to emotional abuse because your defenses are completely stripped away.
Your shields are down.
Exactly. She talks about her first director at Los Tilos, who she describes as having a really harsh, hard personality. This director systematically verbally abused her.
It was constant.
She would call Veronica stupid and subnormal. She monitored her every move. Veronica says she cried every single time she spoke with her.
Now, notice the institutional defense mechanism at play here. When Veronica showed fear or distress from being verbally abused, the director didn't apologize.
No.
She would tell Veronica that she needed to be simple, claiming that simplicity was a virtue.
Unbelievable. So the abuse isn't the problem. Veronica's emotional reaction to being abused is framed as a spiritual failing.
It is classic gaslighting.
Later on, she encounters another abusive director at a boys' center who rigorously enforces the rule of always joy. The director calls her in and demands to know why she is walking around with a sad face, accusing her of not living the rule of joy.
What is devastating here is the complete systemic lack of human empathy. No one stops to ask, why are you sad? Why are you exhausted?
Right, they just demand the performance of joy.
Her natural emotional collapse under the weight of her life is treated as an infraction of the rules. She is 19 years old, expected to act as a seasoned professional with absolutely zero training, carrying the weight of the numerary's domestic weeds on her shoulders, and she is being reprimanded for not smiling enough.
And eventually, the body keeps the score. When the mind is trapped and not allowed to express distress, The physical body starts sounding a massive alarm.
The somatic symptoms?
Yes, Veronica's health deterioration is just harrowing. She develops severe headaches, fainting spells, anxiety, and insomnia. She developed bulimia, compulsively eating, and then vomiting.
Because of the stress.
Yeah, she was so desperate and hungry that she was stealing stale breakfast rolls from the trash. She would get up in the middle of the night to secretly eat ice cream and pastries.
These are classic manifestations of profound psychological distress. When you control nothing about your life, not your money, your schedule, your friendships, your words, or your future, food often becomes the only domain where a person can exert some chaotic form of control or find immediate, albeit destructive, comfort.
And what happens when her body starts shutting down entirely? She goes 2 whole years without menstruation. 2 years.
Which is a severe medical red flag. It indicates extreme stress, malnutrition, or total hormonal collapse. But the institutional response to her physical suffering is perhaps the most chilling part of her entire testimony.
It is entirely dismissive.
Yeah.
It is framed once again as a spiritual failing.
Yes, always shifting the blame to the individual.
When she finally confessed in a chat that she was making herself vomit, the person she told, who was actually a trained nurse, looked at her with total disdain and compared her to the Romans who vomited to keep eating.
No compassion at all. No suggestion of therapy or medical intervention. Just moral judgment.
Another member told her, if you think it passes, don't mention it. Just ignore it. When she suffered from debilitating headaches, the young director accused her of being egoistic.
Egoistic for having a migraine.
Yes. She told Veronica she was probably provoking the pain herself just to avoid work, and told her to examine her conscience and apologize to her sisters.
It's a closed loop of blame. The institution works you to the bone, your body breaks down under the strain, and then the institution blames your broken body on your lack of spiritual purity. It ensures the victim always holds the guilt.
Eventually, the medical reality couldn't be ignored entirely, but even the medical response was warped by the institutional lens. After 2 years without a period, a gynecologist finally tells her she needs a psychologist.
Which is a reasonable medical recommendation.
Right. But Veronica is initially offended because she's been conditioned to believe that in Opus Dei, they don't need psychologists, they have confession.
Right. Therapy is seen as secular and unnecessary.
But she goes. She goes to a psychologist who is a numerary at the University of Navarro Clinic. And the treatment plan is laughable if it wasn't so tragic.
What did they prescribe?
The psychologist tells this girl, who's suffering from severe anorexia, bulimia, and depression, to just go on excursions, sleep more, and don't work on Sundays.
Yeah.
Oh, and she prescribes a massive cocktail of drugs, orfidal and Lexatin.
Just heavy sedatives.
Yeah. Eventually, Veronica is on 6 different medications daily, including Ansium and fluoxetine.
Treating the symptom with heavy sedation while entirely ignoring the systemic cause.
But wait, let me play devil's advocate here for a second. If she is presenting with severe anorexia, bulimia, and depression, wouldn't a heavy psychiatric intervention like medication be standard medical protocol?
Yes, it would.
So why is Veronica viewing this as an institutional betrayal rather than just clumsy medical care?
That is a very fair question. The betrayal lies in the weaponization of the psychiatry. Standard medical protocol would also involve removing the patient from the environment that is causing the acute stress, or at least addressing the environmental factors.
Right, not just keeping them in the same stressful environment.
Exactly. Here, the medication is used to sedate her enough to keep her functioning within the abusive system. The over-medication was so severe that one of the pills actually caused lactation.
Oh, wow.
She says her bras were constantly wet, but she was so broken down she didn't even say anything about it. She just endured it. The drugs weren't meant to heal her, they were meant to make her compliant.
And that leads to the visit to the psychiatrist, which represents the ultimate medical betrayal in her story.
Yes, the diagnosis. This part is incredibly revealing.
The psychiatrist finally looks at her and says, "What's wrong is that you're not well there," meaning the environment is the problem.
Which is true.
But instead of helping her navigate an exit, the psychiatrist slaps her with a diagnosis of a personality disorder and then delivers this devastating prediction. She tells Veronica that even if she leaves Opus Dei, she will never be happy.
A terrible thing to tell a patient.
She tells her she will never find happiness with a partner or children. She will just go from flower to flower because nothing will be enough.
And this answers your previous question perfectly. When a member is failing to thrive in an abusive system, the internal medical professionals pathologize the individual rather than indict the system.
Wow, yeah.
Giving her a personality disorder diagnosis and telling her she's fundamentally broken and incapable of happiness outside the walls is a psychological anchor. It is designed to terrify her into staying. If she is broken everywhere, she might as well stay where she is.
But Veronica, in a moment of sheer survival instinct, thinks to herself, well, I'll have to take the risk, because the alternative was literally dying. But as bad as the physical collapse was, what finally broke her wasn't her own suffering. It was confronting the sheer lack of humanity in the system's extremes.
We have to talk about the incident at the retreat in Segovia.
Yes, this is the most harrowing event in her testimony, and it's what I alluded to at the very beginning of the episode.
It's incredibly dark.
Veronica is at a retreat at Molino Viejo in Segovia, and she witnesses a Numerary assistant attempt suicide by throwing herself from a window.
It's just horrific.
Veronica doesn't just see it, she hears it. She vividly describes seeing the woman's legs and girdle and hearing the sound of her head hitting the stone patio. She compares the sound to a melon hitting the floor. It is a visceral, deeply traumatic sensory memory.
It is acute trauma, witnessing a violent suicide attempt of a peer who is living under the exact same conditions you are.
But the trauma of the event is immediately compounded by the institutional cover-up. The director of the Numerary assistants gathers them and tells them point blank she slipped and fell.
A blatant lie.
Yes. They are told not to move.
Yeah.
Later, the director explicitly asks Veronica what she saw. And Veronica, conditioned by fear and obedience, says nothing.
This is the moment the fracture happens. Veronica knows what she saw, she knows what she heard. But the authority figure demands that she deny her own sensory reality and participate in an institutional lie.
To protect the image of the group.
Yes, when you are forced to do this, you sever the trust in your own mind. It is a profound psychological violation.
And amazingly, this woman survived the fall and was brought back to Veronica's center to be watched. The tension of living with that suppressed reality every single day must have been unbearable.
Unimaginable, really.
But the actual catalyst for Veronica leaving, the final straw, wasn't even this event. It was an issue of fundamental morality.
It usually is. The conditioning can make you endure immense suffering for yourself, but it often breaks when you're forced to inflict it on someone vulnerable.
Veronica was mentoring a teenage girl. This girl was going through a terrible time. Her parents were getting a divorce. She was rebellious. She was experimenting with drugs.
A normal teenager in crisis.
Exactly. And the directors ordered Veronica to expel this girl from the center. And Veronica finally said no. She refused.
She drew a line.
She looked at them and asked, "Where's charity? How can you expel someone like a dog when they need us most?"
It's the moment the empathy overrides the obedience. She recognizes that the institution's primary concern is protecting its own pristine image, not providing the Christian charity it claims to champion.
And of course, she was punished for this defiance. They stripped her of her teaching duties. First, they put her in an English class with a director who literally just made Veronica do her homework for her.
So petty.
Then, in a move of pure humiliation, they forced this grown woman to do basic ABC computer learning booklets. They put her in a dietetics course that she actually loved, but because she was falling asleep from pure exhaustion, they used that as an excuse to say they couldn't trust her to teach anymore.
It is the systemic dismantling of her remaining self-esteem. They are punishing her for showing moral courage by treating her like a disobedient toddler.
By 2006, the extraction finally happened. And I use the word extraction deliberately.
Because she was in such bad shape.
Veronica weighed 47 kilos. She was severely anorexic. She was on 6 different pills a day. She notes that she had previously said in a fraternal chat, "One more day is one day less until I meet God, the love of my life."
Which sounds poetic if you don't look closer.
Right, the director had received that as the beautiful spiritual sentiment, completely ignoring the fact that it was a blatant expression of suicidal ideation from a woman who was actively trying to disappear.
She was dying. She explicitly states she didn't leave because she was angry or because she had a sudden ideological awakening. She left because her body was shutting down. Her parents had to physically come to the center and take her out.
They had to rescue the child they had handed over 20 years prior.
Exactly.
And walking out that door saved her life. It stopped at physical starvation. But as Veronica explains, physically leaving is only the first and perhaps the easiest step. Which brings us to the long shadow of the institution, life on the outside.
This is where Veronica's testimony offers a profoundly valuable framework for understanding recovery from high-control groups. She maps out her post-institutional life into 3 distinct stages.
And this is crucial, right? Because leaving is not the end of the story.
No, it is the beginning of a very long, complex psychological untangling.
Let's walk through these stages. Stage 1 she calls guilt, disguised as gratitude. In this stage, the physical geography has changed, but the mental architecture remains completely intact.
She is outside the building, but the institution still dictates her thoughts.
Right. She initially believed that the institution was fundamentally good, and therefore, because she couldn't survive in it, she was the one at fault.
Which is what they conditioned her to believe.
She felt she had betrayed God. She literally believed her DNA was marked by unhappiness, basically validating what that cruel psychiatrist had told her.
That she would never be happy.
Yeah. She thought she deserved to disappear because she wasn't worthy. She still believed the people in Opus Dei loved her, and that she had been in a good place. It's wild to hear her say she was still 100% fanatical even after leaving.
It is cognitive dissonance at its peak. To survive the trauma of those 20 years, her brain had to believe it was for a greater good.
Otherwise, it's just meaningless suffering.
Exactly. Recognizing instantly that she had been abused and wasted 2 decades of her life would have been psychologically shattering. So the guilt acts as a protective mechanism. It's easier to blame yourself than to face the terrifying void of realizing your entire reality was a manipulation.
But eventually, she transitions to stage 2, which she calls forgetting.
A very common phase.
She says she had to close doors to remove all those beliefs that had taken root in her being so she could just live and be herself. She had to shut down the past to survive the present.
This is a necessary survival mechanism. You cannot function in the normal world if you are constantly processing the trauma of a cultic environment. But that forgetting leaves you incredibly vulnerable because you haven't rebuilt your boundaries yet.
She uses a really striking phrase to describe her vulnerability here. She calls it becoming cattle of the sect.
That is a harsh but accurate self-assessment.
She explains that because she had been conditioned for absolute obedience and had zero life skills, she fell almost immediately into an abusive romantic relationship.
Because it felt familiar.
Yes. In her own words, she was used to being a doormat. She thought being a doormat was normal because she had been one her entire life to make others comfortable.
You don't have to be in a 20-year high-control group to experience a version of this, right? Anytime we are placed in a radically submissive environment, a toxic workplace, an overbearing family, a bad marriage, our baseline for normal shifts.
It totally skews your radar.
Yes. The institution didn't just fail to prepare her for the world, it actively groomed her to be a victim. When your only mode of existing is radical submission to authority, you will naturally gravitate toward relationships that replicate that dynamic because it is the only dynamic you know how to navigate.
And the practical deficits were just staggering. She mentions that at 32 years old, she gets a job in a jewelry store. Her friends at work are talking, joking, making basic cultural references, and she has no idea what they are saying.
She's essentially a time traveler from another era.
Yeah. They make a sexual joke about 69, and she literally goes home and has to ask what it means. She had the social and sexual awareness of a young child trapped in a 32-year-old woman's body.
The institutional attitude on sexuality profoundly stunted her ability to connect with others, and it had tragic consequences.
It really did. The collateral damage of that internal dogma is so clear in her story about a friend outside the institution.
The friend struggling with her sexuality.
Yes. She had a friend who confided in her that she was struggling with same-sex attraction and had even attempted suicide over it. Now, because Opus Dei officially denied the existence of homosexuality among its members, Veronica had zero framework for this.
She was entirely ignorant of how to handle it.
Completely. So what does she do? She goes to an Opus Dei priest for advice. The priest tells her it is an illness, it can be treated, and gives her a book to give to her friend.
And Veronica, thinking she is genuinely helping, gives this quote-unquote treatment book to her suicidal, deeply vulnerable friend.
The result is exactly what you'd expect. The friend is deeply alienated and refuses to speak to Veronica for years. It wasn't until Veronica started speaking out publicly on podcasts years later that the friend finally reconnected with her.
The institution's homophobia didn't just harm its own members, it weaponized Veronica against her own friends on the outside.
But unpacking that damage leads to Veronica's stage 3, which is healing, reinterpreting the past and finally speaking out.
Which is where she is now.
She credits documentaries, YouTube channels, and spaces like Agora Talks for allowing former members to share their experiences. She realizes that sharing is a form of healing.
It is the antidote to the forgetting phase.
In stage 3, the mental walls finally come down. She is able to look back and state definitively, the institution is not good. She recognizes that an organization that assaults and manipulates intelligence, will, emotions, economy, and spirituality is inherently harmful.
But reaching that clarity and seeking accountability is a massive uphill battle. Veronica notes that she and several other former members tried to get together to legally denounce their experiences. They wanted real accountability.
But it didn't go anywhere, right?
No. They were told by legal professionals not to even bother. They were advised that it wouldn't even get past the lawyer's office because of the institution's perceived influence in the Spanish judiciary at the time.
That is just incredibly frustrating. But regardless of the legal outcomes, the act of attempting to seek justice, of refusing to be silent anymore, is a vital part of reclaiming one's autonomy.
It is the ultimate act of defiance.
Which is why Veronica's ultimate message is so important. She wants anyone who has left a similar situation to know that they are brave, that they are strong, that what they lived through wasn't a dream, even if it was a total nightmare.
She really emphasizes the profound necessity of professional help. Real, independent professional help, not institutional gatekeepers.
Exactly. She urges people to put the pieces of their lives back together to realize their own value. Denouncing what happened is painful, it hurts a lot, but it is the path to healing.
You know, Veronica's story forces us to ask a difficult question about the very nature of consent.
What do you mean?
If an institution dictates your vocabulary, manages your money, regulates your sleep, isolates you from your family, and filters your relationships from the time you are 13 years old, what does choosing to stay actually mean?
Wow, yeah.
When the walls of a prison are made of your own deeply held, externally implanted beliefs, the greatest escape isn't walking out the front door. It is the painstaking, years-long process of learning how to think for yourself all over again.
The door really is just the beginning. Thank you so much for joining us for this exploration of Veronica Navarro's testimony. We hope it gave you a lot to think about regarding the mechanics of control and the incredible resilience of the human spirit. Remember to subscribe to Agora Talks, and we will see you next time.
Blessings on the center line. Count my losses in the passing pines. If every wrong turn still somehow led me here to you, guess I can't complain when I look back through this back road rear view. First scar on my knuckle from a fight that proved